25 years. That's how long I parked in the same spot outside that steel and glass tomb they called an office building. Same thermos. Same elevator button with the smudged brass coating. Same half-hearted, "Mornin', Griff," from the kid at reception who never looked up from his phone. And just like that, it was over. My name is Griffin Malloy. I'm 55 years old, and 2 hours ago, I was the senior operations strategist for Halverson Dynamics in Toledo, Ohio. Now I'm the guy walking across the parking lot with a cardboard box in his arms. It didn't happen in slow motion, like people say. It was fast. Surgical. Cold. Lance Halverson, CEO, founder's son, a man who wore $1,000 suits like they were pajamas, called me into conference room B. No eye contact. No, thank you for your years of dedication, no handshake. Just that clipped, MBA-baked tone he used when he wanted to sound firm. Griff, we're restructuring. Leaner model. Honestly, you're just too expensive now. That was it. Too expensive. Not too old. Not irrelevant. Just a line on a budget spreadsheet. I suppose I should thank him for the honesty. He slid a manila envelope across the table like he was handing me a menu. Generous severance. HR will walk you through it. And he left. Left me sitting there like a damn ghost at my own funeral. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the envelope for a long time before sliding it into my briefcase. Packed up my stuff, family photo, leather-bound notebook I never stopped using, the little paperweight my daughter made me in 3rd grade. It says, "World's okayest dad." I always thought it was funny. By the time I walked out, the office had already moved on. No one looked surprised. A couple heads turned, one in turn gave me a sympathetic glance, but mostly, it was back to Slack messages and catered sandwiches. Outside, the sky was gunmetal gray. Toledo in November never tries too hard. I sat in my car for a while. Engine off. Phone buzzing in my pocket, probably messages from HR or my wife, Meryl. I didn't check. I needed silence. I needed to feel the weight of what just happened. 25 years. I trained half the management team still on that floor. I built processes they still use. I kept things moving when the company nearly went under in 2008. And now? Now I was too expensive. But here's the thing. Something strange happened in that parking lot, right as the cold wind kicked up and the last yellow leaves skated across my windshield. I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. A terrifying, unexplainable, unfamiliar relief. Because if I wasn't theirs anymore, maybe I could finally figure out who the hell I was. When I got home, the house was too quiet. Meryl was still at her shift, she's a trauma nurse at St. Luke's, so I had the place to myself. I set the box down on the kitchen counter like it was made of glass, afraid something inside might break if I moved too fast. The coffee pot was still warm. I poured myself a cup out of habit. Took a sip. Tasted like regret. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. The silence was thick. Not peaceful, dead. Like the house knew something had shifted. Maybe it did. My daughter June had moved out last spring, New York, grad school, studying urban policy. I used to joke she was going to fix cities and I was just trying to keep the lights on in one company. Now, I wasn't even doing that. I took the envelope out of my briefcase. Inside was a severance package, 12 weeks pay, continuation of health benefits for 3 months, outplacement services. Corporate jargon for, "Here's a soft pillow, now get out." I wasn't angry. That was the weirdest part. I'd expected anger. Or panic. Maybe even shame. But all I felt was empty space. Like something heavy had been lifted off my chest, and now I had no idea what to do with all the air. At 4:13 p.m., the sun dipped low behind the neighbor's chimney. Shadows stretched long across the hardwood. The whole house looked different in this light. Older. like it had seen too much. I stood up and wandered into my garage. The tools were all where they always were. The pegboard I'd built 10 years ago still held my socket wrenches in military alignment. I grabbed one, put it back, closed the door. I didn't want to fix anything. That night, Meryl came home and found me sitting in the same chair, in the same clothes. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me, then walked over and hugged me like someone had died. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. She pulled back, looked me in the eye, and said something I'll never forget. "Griff, maybe this is the best thing that's ever happened to you." I wanted to laugh, or cry, or throw something. But all I said was, "Maybe." And that night, I didn't set an alarm for the next morning. First time in 25 years. The next morning I woke up at 6:30 anyway. Body memory, I guess. 25 years of rising before the sun doesn't wash off overnight. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the furnace kicking in. I didn't have anywhere to be. No emails. No meetings. No project timelines to chase. Just stillness. Meryl had already left for work, and the house was filled with that particular kind of morning quiet I never used to notice. I made eggs. Burned the toast. Sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open but nothing to type. Then I did something that felt absurd. I made a list. Things I actually know how to do, that was the title I typed. It was a long list. Build operational systems from scratch. Crisis management, real crisis, not, "Oh no, the copier's jammed," kind. Budget optimization. Logistics under pressure. Mentoring young managers. Hiring the right people. Firing the wrong ones. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I wrote, something started to click. I'd spent decades solving other people's problems, quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. I was the guy CEOs leaned on when their visions started cracking under pressure. I'd been the architect behind half a dozen turnarounds. And yet, for all that, I had never once thought of myself as the product. But what if I was? By lunch, I'd outlined an idea that felt strange coming from me. Independent consulting. Not flashy. Not some startup fantasy. Just me, offering what I actually know to small businesses, real businesses, that couldn't afford to hire someone like me full-time. No corporate bloat. No empty titles. No politics. Just results. Of course, I had no website. No social media presence. My LinkedIn page looked like it had been built in 2009 and abandoned shortly after. But I could fix that. I started making calls to people I respected, not because they owed me favors, but because I genuinely wanted to learn. I called Jonah, an old colleague who left Halverson 2 years before me to start his own thing. I figured he wouldn't pick up. He answered on the second ring. "Griff? Holy hell. You finally got out?" I laughed. More like pushed. "Same difference," he said. "What are you thinking?" I told him. Kept it short. No pitch. No ego. Just the truth. He paused for a second, then said, "I know 3 people who need exactly what you just described. Can I connect you?" And just like that, the silence began to break. 3 weeks later, I found myself in the back room of a struggling auto parts distributor in Sandusky, Ohio, sitting across from a guy named Wes Callahan. Wes looked like a man who hadn't slept properly since 2017. His desk was a war zone, stacks of invoices, coffee-stained printouts, an unopened bottle of ibuprofen. He was probably mid-40s but wore the exhaustion of a man 10 years older. "You're Griffin Malloy, right? Jonah says you're the guy who sees the holes in the boat before it sinks." I smiled. "That's one way to put it." He rubbed his face. "Listen, I don't have time for consulting nonsense. I just need to figure out why my warehouse is bleeding money and why my guys can't hit deadlines to save their lives. Fair enough, I said. How about I spend a few days shadowing your team? No promises. I'll tell you exactly what I see. No fluff. Just answers. Wes leaned back, stared at me for a long second, then nodded. Fine. You've got 4 days. Impress me, and we'll talk. I spent the next 72 hours doing what I used to do without ever being asked, listening. I talked to warehouse leads, rode in a delivery van, stood in a cold loading bay watching guys rush orders with paperwork that looked like it had been faxed from 1985. No digital tracking. No redundancy. Zero cross-training. By Thursday, I had 3 pages of notes, 5 bulletproof recommendations, and a floor plan sketch that showed Wes how to shave 20% off his order processing time without hiring a single new person. He looked at it like I'd handed him a map to buried treasure. Griff, how the hell did you even see this? I shrugged. I've lived in operations. Most people want to fix symptoms. I like to find the infection. Wes laughed. A real laugh, deep, unfiltered, tired but grateful. Okay, he said. Let's talk about next steps. That was my first paid job. A check with my name on it, not a company name, not a logo, just me. $3,000. Modest by corporate standards. But when I held it in my hands, it felt like $1 million. Because it was mine. Word spread faster than I expected. Jonah introduced me to a client in Cleveland. That client sent me to a friend in Dayton. Within a month, I had 4 companies on retainer, and more emails than I knew what to do with. But it wasn't just the business. Something else was changing. I wasn't just working, I was alive. I was solving problems again, but without the sludge of corporate politics weighing me down. I set my own hours. If I wanted to take a walk in the middle of the day or grab lunch with Meryl, I could. No permission slips. No calendars stacked back to back. For the first time in decades, I wasn't drowning in someone else's system. I was building my own. It was a Tuesday morning when the first call came in. I was at a small cafe downtown, laptop open, second espresso half gone. A local bakery chain had just signed me to overhaul their supply chain, 7 locations, 3 warehouses, and a truck that somehow never arrived on time. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. 419 area code. I answered without thinking. Griffin Malloy speaking. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in almost a year, Danielle Penn, Director of Ops at Halverson Dynamics. She used to be my mentee. Smart. Sharp. Always asking the right questions, until Lance Halverson started skipping over me and going directly to her. Griff? Hi. Wow, hi. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I kept my tone neutral. What can I do for you, Danielle? She exhaled, clearly flustered. So, things are kind of upside down over here. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Yeah. 2 senior managers quit last month. 1 left with a full client list. Lance is scrambling. And we realized, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that kind of walked out the door with you. I let the silence hang for a beat. Then 2. Then I said, that tends to happen when you tell someone they're too expensive. She laughed nervously. Right. Listen, no one here thinks that was handled well. And honestly, we could really use someone to come in, just short-term, stabilize ops. You know the systems better than anyone. I stared out the window. It was snowing lightly, soft flakes settling on the sidewalk. Peaceful. And for the first time in years, I had zero desire to walk back into that building. I appreciate the call, Danielle, I said. But I'm booked out for the next 2 months. Maybe more. Oh. She paused. Any chance you could recommend someone? I considered it. I had a guy in Dayton who was solid, newer to the game, hungry for work. I gave her his name and number. We exchanged a few polite words, then hung up. I sat there for a while, just watching the snow. They needed me. But I didn't need them. That truth settled over me like warm sunlight in winter. Not out of spite. Not revenge. Just clarity. I had outgrown them, not the other way around. 3 months later, I sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea and my grandson asleep on my chest. He was only 8 weeks old, tiny hands, full lungs, and a cry like a fire alarm. June and her husband had flown in from New York for the week, and now the house was filled with baby bottles, laundry baskets, and more joy than I remembered it being capable of holding. Merrill stepped outside and handed me a blanket. "He's gonna catch a chill." I nodded, tucked it gently around his feet. The sky was turning gold, the kind of soft amber light Ohio saves for late spring. Our dog was snoring under the porch swing. It was quiet, the good kind this time. I hadn't taken on a new client in 2 weeks. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't want to. Business was good. Better than good. I had 4 steady contracts, a waiting list, and 2 companies offering to license my internal training frameworks. I'd spoken on a podcast, had 3 articles published in industry journals, and hired a part-time assistant to handle scheduling. But more importantly, I had time. Time to walk with Merrill in the mornings. Time to FaceTime June without glancing at the clock. Time to take on the kind of work I believed in, not the kind that drained me. My phone buzzed again that morning. Another 419 number. Another voice from the past. This time, it was Lance Halverson himself. I didn't answer. He left a message. His voice sounded different, tight, rushed, uncertain. He mentioned the board, operational gaps, legacy systems, and something about strategic reintegration. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of peace. There's a difference between letting go and turning your back. I wasn't running from anything. I just finally stopped needing to prove myself to people who never really saw me in the first place. I looked down at my grandson, still asleep, warm against my chest. For years I'd given my best to someone else's kingdom. Now I was building my own. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was.